Jake Harrison never thought his first day as captain would end with alien chains around his wrists. The morning had started so well on the exploration ship, UNS Liberty. His crew was excited about making history as Earth's first diplomatic team to reach the Zephyrian Empire. Now Jake sat in what looked like a crystal prison cell, wondering where everything went wrong. The Liberty had been cruising through Zephyrian space for only 3 hours when the aliens found them. Jake remembered looking at the scanner readings, with his pilot Lisa Martinez. She had pointed to the screen with worry in her brown eyes. Dozens of ships were coming toward them fast, too fast to be friendly. "Captain, those ships don't match any design in our database," Lisa had said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. She was good at flying, but this was her first mission beyond Earth's solar system. Engineer Tony Brooks had run onto the bridge with sweat on his forehead. "Sir, they're doing something to our engines. Some kind of energy field is shutting down our power systems one by one." Communications Officer Sam Kelly tried desperately to send messages to the alien fleet. "This is the UNS Liberty on a peaceful diplomatic mission from Earth. We request safe passage to meet with your government." But there was no answer except the growing hum of alien technology surrounding their ship. Jake had made the decision to surrender when their life support started, failing. He would not let his crew die in empty space because of his pride. The alien ships looked like living crystals that glowed with inner light. They moved through space without any visible engines or thrusters. The boarding party that came for them was unlike anything Jake had imagined. The Zephyrians stood nearly 8 feet tall with skin that looked like clear crystals showing veins of blue light underneath. Each alien had 6 arms that moved with fluid grace. Their faces were almost human, but stretched in ways that made Jake's mind struggle to understand what he was seeing. The leader of the boarding party had 4 eyes instead of 2. Each eye was a different shade of blue from pale sky to deep ocean. When this alien spoke, the words sounded like music played on instruments Jake had never heard. A small device on its belt translated the sounds into English. "Humans from the 3rd planet of Sol system, you will come with us. The Queen must see you immediately." Jake had tried to negotiate. "We come in peace. We only want to establish friendly relations between our peoples." But the aliens had not listened. They put metal bands around Jake's wrists that felt warm against his skin. The bands were not heavy, but he could not remove them no matter how hard he tried. His crew received the same treatment before they were separated and taken to different ships. The journey to wherever they were going took 2 days. Jake was kept in a cell that was more comfortable than he expected. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the alien ships. They glowed softly and provided both light and warmth. Food appeared 3 times a day through a slot in the wall. It tasted strange, but was not unpleasant. Jake spent the time trying to understand his situation. The aliens treated him with what seemed like respect rather than cruelty. The guards who brought his food always bowed slightly before entering his cell. When he tried to speak to them, they listened carefully even though they rarely responded. On the 2nd day, Jake's cell wall became transparent. Outside, he could see space filled with more crystal ships than he could count. They moved in perfect formation around a vessel so large it looked like a floating city. The ship had towers and spires that reached out in all directions. Lights moved along its surface in patterns that reminded Jake of neurons firing in a brain. "The palace ship of Queen Zeraleth," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see one of the guards standing in his cell doorway. This alien was different from the others. Older, perhaps, with crystal skin that showed more colors than just blue. "You speak English?" Jake said. "I am High Priest Valdris. I have studied your language since our long-range sensors detected your ship entering our territory. The Queen has been waiting for this day for many cycles." Waiting for what day? The day the children of the firstborn would return to us. Jake had no idea what that meant. Before he could ask, Valdris gestured for him to follow. They walked through corridors filled with crystal formations that pulsed with gentle light. Other Zephyrians stopped their activities to watch Jake pass. Some bowed like the guards had done. Others made complex gestures with their 6 arms that looked like religious ceremonies. The throne room was the most beautiful and terrifying place Jake had ever seen. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared in shadows. Crystal pillars supported walkways and balconies where hundreds of aliens gathered to watch. The floor was made of some kind of living crystal that reflected Jake's image in patterns that hurt his eyes to look at directly. At the center of it all sat the throne of Queen Zeraleth. The chair itself seemed to be grown rather than built from a single massive crystal. It caught light from all directions and threw it back in colors Jake had never seen before. The queen herself was a being of such alien beauty that Jake forgot to breathe for a moment. Queen Zeraleth was larger than the other Zephyrians Jake had seen. Her crystal skin showed veins of gold and silver along with the blue. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid light flowing around her body. Her 4 eyes were each a different color now: blue, green, gold, and silver. They fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking into his soul. The guards brought Jake forward until he stood 20 feet from the throne. The entire court fell silent. Jake could hear only the sound of his own heartbeat and the gentle hum of crystal technology all around him. He lifted his head to meet the queen's gaze, because he would not show fear even in this impossible situation. That was when something happened that Jake would never understand. Queen Zeraleth, ruler of what seemed to be a galactic empire, slowly stood from her throne. The court held its breath as she stepped down from the platform. Then, as Jake watched in complete bewilderment, the most powerful being he had ever seen knelt before him. Her 4 eyes closed and she bowed her head. The 6 arms folded across her chest in what was clearly a gesture of deep respect. She spoke. In her musical language, and even without translation, Jake could tell the words sounded like prayers. The entire court followed their queen's example. Hundreds of aliens knelt in perfect silence, while Jake stood frozen in shock. His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Why would the queen of an advanced alien civilization kneel before a human prisoner? What did they think he was? High Priest Valdris was the only alien still standing. He moved beside Jake and whispered, "She recognizes the mark of the firstborn. In you, Captain Harrison. To her you are not a prisoner. You are the return of the creators themselves." Jake looked down at the kneeling queen and felt the weight of something vast and incomprehensible settling on his shoulders. Whatever these aliens believed about him, it was clear that his life and the lives of his crew would never be the same again. 3 days passed before Jake saw another human face. The aliens had moved him from his cell to rooms that were more like a luxury hotel than a prison. The walls were still made of living crystal, but now they showed him images of alien worlds. When he touched them, beautiful planets with purple seas and silver forests that moved in winds he could not feel. The food was better, too. Instead of the bland meals from his cell, Jake now received dishes that actually tasted good. The aliens seemed to have studied human nutrition carefully. Everything he ate made him feel stronger and more alert than he had in years, but the luxury did not help with his confusion. Every alien who entered his rooms knelt when they saw him. Guards, servants, even what looked like important officials in flowing robes. Jake tried to tell them to stop, but they did not understand, or chose to ignore him. Queen Zeraleth visited him twice each day. She always knelt when she entered, and stayed kneeling while they tried to communicate. Her English was getting better, but still had large gaps. She kept saying words like firstborn and creator and prophecy, while pointing at Jake with reverence in her 4 eyes. Jake felt like he was going crazy from not understanding what they wanted from him. He was just a starship captain from Earth. He had grown up in a small town in Ohio, gone to the Space Academy, and worked his way up through the ranks of the Earth fleet. There was nothing special about him that would make alien royalty bow down. On the 4th day, the door to his rooms opened, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked in. Jake almost cried with relief at seeing his xenobiologist alive and well. Elena looked as confused as Jake felt, but she was not in chains. Her brown hair was clean, and she wore new clothes that looked like they were made from alien materials. "Captain," Elena said, "I think we need to talk about what's happening here." "Elena, thank God you're okay. Where are Lisa, Tony, and Sam? They're all alive and being treated well. But Jake, these aliens think we're something we're not. They've been testing my blood and running scans on all of us. The results are impossible." Before Jake could ask what she meant, High Priest Valdris entered the room. He bowed to Jake as always, but nodded respectfully to Elena. His English had improved dramatically over the past few days. Dr. Rodriguez has been learning about our history and our faith, Valdris said. She understands now why Queen Ziralith knelt when she saw you, Captain Harrison. Elena sat down heavily in one of the crystal chairs. Her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly. Jake, they've shown me things that change everything we thought we knew about human history, about the history of this entire galaxy. What kind of things? Valdris activated a device that projected images into the air above them. The first image showed a star map of the entire galaxy with thousands of points marked in different colors. This is our territory as it exists now, he explained. But this is how it looked 50 million years ago. The image changed to show the same galaxy, but with different markings. Jake could see that the patterns were completely different. Where there were now dozens of separate civilizations, the ancient map showed one massive empire that covered almost everything. The firstborn, Valdris continued, were the first intelligent species to rise in this galaxy. They seeded life on thousands of worlds and guided the evolution of countless races. Every civilization that exists today owes its existence to their work. Elena leaned forward. Jake, I've seen their genetic databases. The Zephyrians have been collecting biological samples from every species they've encountered for thousands of years. They've been looking for traces of firstborn DNA in all of them. And they found it in us. Not just traces, Elena said quietly. Jake, according to their tests, humans carry more firstborn genetic markers than any other species they've ever discovered. We're not descendants of the firstborn. We are the firstborn, or at least their direct inheritors. Jake stared at the star maps floating in the air. That's impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We have fossil records going back millions of years. Valdris nodded. Yes, you evolved on Earth. But the firstborn planted the seeds of that evolution. Long ago, they knew their time was ending and they wanted to preserve their legacy. Earth was chosen as a sanctuary world where their genetics could develop naturally without interference. What happened to them? The original firstborn? The priest's crystal skin darkened with what looked like sadness. They faced an enemy that could not be defeated with conventional weapons. The Void Devourers came from beyond the galaxy and consumed everything in their path. The firstborn fought them for 1,000 years before realizing they could not win. Elena activated her own device to show Jake medical scans. They've been testing all of us, but your results are different from the rest of the crew. You carry the strongest firstborn genetic signature they've ever recorded. Your DNA contains sequences that match their most sacred artifacts. What artifacts? Valdris. Changed the projection to show images of crystalline structures that looked almost alive. Weapons and tools left behind by the firstborn. Most are dormant now, waiting for the proper genetic key to activate them. A key that only exists in your bloodline, Captain Harrison. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying they built weapons that only humans can use? Not all humans, only those with the strongest firstborn heritage. Our tests show that perhaps 1 in 10,000 humans carry enough of the genetic markers to interface with firstborn technology. But you, Captain, you carry almost the complete sequence. Elena showed Jake more of her research. I've been studying their historical records. They have prophecies that go back thousands of years, all talking about the return of the firstborn, children. The prophecies say that when the ancient enemy returns, only the firstborn heir can activate the weapons needed to defeat them. Ancient enemy? Valdris's 4 eyes showed fear for the first time since Jake had met him. The Void Devourers. Our long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of our territory, signatures that match the ancient records of Devourer ships. Jake stood up and walked to the crystal wall. Outside, he could see the massive fleet of Zephyrian vessels surrounding the palace ship. How long do we have? Our scientists estimate perhaps 3 months before they reach the core systems of our empire. Without the firstborn weapons, we cannot stop them. They will consume every living thing in the galaxy just as they did 50 million years ago. Elena joined Jake at the wall. That's why the Queen knelt when she saw you. To her people, you're not just a human captain. You're the prophesied savior who can activate weapons powerful enough to destroy the Void Devourers. But I don't know how to use ancient alien weapons. I barely understand my own ship's technology. The genetic interface is supposed to be instinctive, Valdris explained. The firstborn designed their weapons to respond to thought patterns encoded in their DNA. If the prophecies are correct, you will know what to do when the time comes. Jake turned back to face the priest. And if the prophecies are wrong? Then every civilization in the galaxy will be consumed by the void, and all life will end forever. The weight of those words settled on Jake like a physical burden. He looked at Elena and saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. They had come to this part of space looking for peaceful first contact with alien life. Instead, they had found themselves at the center of an ancient prophecy that could determine the fate of billions of lives. Queen Zyrillith entered the room at that moment and immediately knelt before Jake. She spoke in her musical language and Valdris translated. She says that she knows this burden is terrible for you to carry, but she also says that the blood of heroes runs in your veins, and she believes you will find the courage to save us all. Jake looked down at the alien queen kneeling before him and wondered if he had the strength to be what these people needed him to be. The emergency alarm started screaming 2 weeks later while Jake was trying to learn how to use firstborn technology. He had been working with Valdris in a laboratory deep inside the palace ship, attempting to activate what looked like a crystal control panel. The ancient device had glowed briefly when Jake touched it, but nothing more had happened. "What does that sound mean?" Jake asked, as the musical tones echoed through the corridors. Valdris's crystal skin had turned a dark blue color that Jake had learned meant fear. "Long-range sensors have detected unknown ships at the edge of our territory, ships that do not respond to our communications." They rushed to the bridge where Queen Zyrillith was already coordinating with her fleet commanders. The main display showed a tactical map of Zephyrian space with dozens of red dots moving inward from the galactic rim. The red dots were moving faster than any ship Jake had ever heard of. "How fast are they traveling?" Jake asked. "0.7 light speed without using hyperspace corridors," one of the bridge officers reported. "No known technology can achieve such velocity in normal space." Elena arrived on the bridge with Tony Brooks and Sam Kelly. All three of his crew members looked worried, but also amazed by the alien technology surrounding them. Tony especially seemed fascinated by the crystal. "Control systems, Captain," Sam said. "I've been monitoring communications throughout the Zephyrian fleet. They're receiving reports from outer colonies about ships matching no known design consuming entire star systems." Consuming? That's the word they keep using in translation, not destroying or conquering. Consuming. Queen Zyrillith approached, Jake and knelt as she always did before speaking. Through the translation device, her words were clear but frightening. "The Void Devourers have awakened. 3 of our border systems have already been consumed completely. No planets, no debris, no trace that they ever existed." Jake stared at the tactical display as more red dots appeared at the edge of Zephyrian space. "How many ships are we looking at?" "Our sensors show at least 2,000 vessels in the first wave," Valdris reported. "But there may be more behind them that we cannot detect yet." Elena had been studying the sensor readings with growing horror. "Jake, I'm reading energy signatures that don't match anything in known physics. These ships seem to be made of some kind of organized dark matter." "Living ships," Queen Zyrillith said through the translator. "The ancient records describe them as creatures rather than machines. They feed on stellar matter and organic life, growing larger and more powerful with every system they consume." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of alien technology. Jake could feel the weight of every eye on him, waiting for him to say something wise or inspiring. But he was just a human who had been captain for less than a month. How was he supposed to fight enemies that could erase star systems? "Show me the firstborn weapons," Jake said finally. Valdris led them deeper into the palace ship than Jake had ever gone before. The corridors became older and stranger as they descended, with crystal formations that pulsed in patterns that seemed almost alive. Finally, they reached a chamber that was clearly not built by the Zephyrians. The room was huge, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. Ancient machines covered in crystalline growths lined the walls. Some were recognizable as control panels or displays. Others were completely alien in function and design. At the center of the room stood something that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. The weapon control system was a throne made of what looked like living crystal. Cables and conduits of organic metal connected it to massive machines throughout the chamber. The entire setup hummed with barely contained energy that made the air itself feel thick and heavy. The firstborn called it the Galaxy Grid, Valdris explained. A network of quantum resonators hidden throughout space that can target specific forms of matter and energy. The Void Devourers exist partially outside normal space-time, but the grid was designed to reach them wherever they hide. Elena was already studying the control systems with her scientific instruments. Jake, the neural interface requirements for this system are incredible. The amount of data processing needed would burn out a human brain in seconds. Unless that brain carries firstborn genetics, Valdris said. Your DNA contains the biological quantum processors needed to interface safely with the grid, but the process will still be extremely dangerous. Jake approached the crystal throne carefully. When he got within 5 feet of it, the entire chamber seemed to respond to his presence. Lights began pulsing in patterns that reminded him of heartbeats. The sound of the machinery changed from a simple hum to something more complex, like voices singing in harmonies too subtle for human ears to fully understand. It recognizes you, Queen Zarelith said with awe in her voice. Jake reached out to touch the armrest of the throne and immediately jerked his hand back. The moment his skin made contact with the crystal, his mind was filled with images and sensations that were not his own. He saw star systems being born and dying, civilizations rising and falling, and always the creeping darkness of the Void Devourers consuming everything in their path. The activation process requires perfect neural synchronization, Valdris explained. You must merge your consciousness temporarily with the grid network. During that time, you will experience the thoughts and memories of every firstborn who ever used the system. Will I survive it? The ancient records suggest that survival is possible with proper preparation and support. Queen Zarelith has been training her most gifted psychics to provide mental shields during the activation process. Elena grabbed Jake's arm. There has to be another way. We can't ask you to risk your life on ancient alien technology that might not even work anymore. Before Jake could respond, alarms started sounding throughout the chamber. Sam Kelly ran to one of the working displays and studied the information flowing across it. Captain, we're receiving reports from the Outer Defense Fleet. The Void Devourers have engaged our ships at the Kepler system. The battle is not going well. The main display showed a tactical view of the fighting. Zephyrian crystal ships were firing beams of pure energy at dark shapes that seemed to absorb the attacks without taking damage. As Jake watched, one of the alien vessels simply dissolved into nothing when a Void Devourer touched it. How long until they reach the core systems? Jake asked. At their current speed, perhaps 6 days, Valdris replied. But they will grow stronger and faster as they consume more matter and energy. Jake looked around the chamber at the faces of his crew and the aliens who had placed their faith in him. Tony was staring at the firstborn technology with the fascination of a born engineer. Sam was already working to understand the alien communication systems. Elena watched Jake with worry, but also with trust in his judgment. Queen Zarelith knelt beside the crystal throne and spoke without needing translation. I know you are afraid. I am afraid too. But sometimes courage is not the absence of fear. Sometimes courage is doing what must be done despite being afraid. Jake sat down in the crystal throne and felt the ancient technology respond to his presence. The neural interface cables moved toward him like living things, ready to connect. His human mind to a network of weapons built by gods 50 million years ago. If I don't survive this, Jake said to his crew, make sure Earth knows what happened here. Make sure they know why it was necessary. Elena knelt beside him just as the Queen had done. We'll be right here with you, Captain. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone. Jake nodded and placed his hands on the control surfaces of the throne. The moment his skin made contact, the chamber filled with light and sound as the galaxy grid began to wake up for the first time in 50 million years. The neural interface felt like lightning flowing through Jake's brain. The moment his hands touched the control surfaces, his consciousness exploded outward beyond anything a human mind was meant to experience. He could suddenly feel the entire galaxy as if it were part of his own body, with stars like nerve endings and planets like cells in a vast organism. But the pain was incredible. Jake's vision went white and he could hear himself screaming even, though his voice seemed to come from very far away. The firstborn neural patterns were trying to integrate with his human brain, and the process felt like his skull was being torn apart from the inside. Then Queen Ziraleth and her psychic advisors began their work. Jake felt their alien minds touching his, not trying to control or change him, but simply offering support and strength. The crushing weight of galactic consciousness became bearable as the Zephyrian mental shields took some of the burden from his fragile human psyche. Through the grid network, Jake could see everything. The Void Devourers were not ships in any conventional sense. They were living creatures of dark energy and organized entropy, existing partially outside normal space-time. Each one was the size of a small moon, and they moved through space like sharks through water, consuming everything in their path. Jake watched in horror as the creatures reached the outer Zephyrian defense fleets. The crystal ships fired their most powerful weapons, but the energy beams simply disappeared into the dark matter hulls of the Devourers. When the creatures touched the Zephyrian vessels, they did not explode or break apart. They simply ceased to exist, as if they had never been built at all. "I can see them," Jake managed to say through gritted teeth, "but I don't know how to operate the weapon systems." Valdris's voice seemed to come from very far away, even though he was standing right beside the throne. "Let the firstborn memories guide you. Do not fight the ancient knowledge. Accept it as part of yourself." Jake stopped resisting the alien, patterns flowing through his mind. Immediately, he was flooded with memories that were not his own. He saw the galaxy as it had been 50 million years ago when the firstborn ruled over thousands of worlds. He experienced their joy at discovering new forms of life and their patient work of seeding intelligence throughout the galaxy. And he felt their horror when the Void Devourers first appeared at the galactic rim. The ancient enemy had come from the void between galaxies, creatures of pure hunger that existed only to consume and grow. They had already devoured 3 entire galaxies before reaching the Milky Way. The firstborn had fought them for 1,000 years, trying every weapon and strategy they could imagine. Nothing had worked. The Devourers absorbed energy, consumed matter, and grew stronger from every attack. Conventional weapons were worse than useless, because they only fed the creatures more material to incorporate into their dark matter bodies. That was when the firstborn had built the galaxy grid. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers with energy or explosives, the grid was designed to unravel the quantum structures that held them together. It was a weapon that attacked the fundamental forces that made matter and energy possible. Jake could feel the grid responding to his thoughts. Now, ancient quantum resonators hidden throughout the galaxy were powering up for the first time in 50 million years. The weapon system was vast beyond comprehension, built into the fabric of space itself. But using it would require him to target each devourer individually while maintaining his connection to the grid network. Jake would have to track hundreds of enemies across multiple star systems, while his human brain was merged with technology designed for minds far more advanced than his own. "I can't do this alone," Jake said. "There are too many of them and they're moving too fast." Queen Ziraleth knelt beside the throne and took one of his hands in her 4 arms. Through the neural link, Jake could suddenly feel her mind joining with his. Then Valdris added his consciousness to the connection. One by one, other Zephyrians throughout the palace ship linked their thoughts to the grid network. Suddenly, Jake was not alone in the vast galactic consciousness. Hundreds of alien minds were sharing the burden of processing information from across the galaxy. He could see through thousands of sensor arrays, track the movement of every devourer, and coordinate the targeting systems of the quantum resonators. The first test came when a group of devourers reached the Altair system. Jake focused the grid's power on the lead creature and felt the ancient weapons respond to his will. Quantum resonators hidden in asteroid fields throughout the system fired pulses of organized space-time that struck the devourer at the subatomic level. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the creature simply came apart as the forces holding its dark matter together were systematically unraveled. The devourer dissolved into component particles that scattered harmlessly through space. Jake felt a surge of hope as he targeted the next creature. The grid weapons were working exactly as the firstborn had designed them. But there were so many devourers. and each one required precise individual targeting. The mental strain was enormous, even with the Zephyrian minds helping to support him. Hours passed as Jake fought his way through the ancient enemy. His human body was pushed far beyond its limits, but the neural interface kept him connected to the weapon systems. He could feel his crew members nearby, offering what support they could. Elena monitoring his vital signs, Tony studying the grid technology, Sam coordinating communications with the Zephyrian fleet. The turning point came when Jake realized he could use the grid network to predict where the Devourers would appear next. The creatures moved through folded space-time in patterns that followed the gravitational flows of the galaxy. By understanding those patterns, Jake could position the quantum resonators to attack the Devourers the moment they entered normal space. But the Devourers were learning too. As Jake destroyed more of them, the survivors began changing their approach, patterns, and movement strategies. They started working together in coordinated groups that could overwhelm individual resonator stations before the grid could target them effectively. Jake found himself in a deadly game of strategy played across the entire galaxy. Every move he made was countered by the adaptive intelligence of the ancient enemy. The Devourers were not just mindless consumers. They were learning from each encounter and becoming more dangerous with every passing hour. Jake, your neural activity is approaching critical levels, Elena warned. Your brain can't take much more of this strain. Through the grid network, Jake could see that more Devourers were appearing at the galactic rim. The first wave had been just a scout force. Now the main invasion fleet was arriving, and it was larger than anything the Firstborn had faced in their ancient war. Thousands of the dark matter creatures were pouring into the galaxy from multiple directions. Even with the grid weapons working perfectly, Jake could not target them all fast enough to prevent some from reaching inhabited systems. Queen Zeraleth squeezed his hand tighter and spoke through the neural link. The grid network has a final activation mode that the Firstborn used only once in their history. It will destroy every Devourer in the galaxy simultaneously, but the energy requirements are enormous. Jake felt the terrible knowledge flowing into his mind. The final mode would require him to channel the power of multiple star systems through his human nervous system. The Firstborn, who had used it 50 million years ago, had died in the process, but they had saved the galaxy from complete consumption. Will it work? Jake asked. Yes, Valdris replied through the link. But you will not survive the activation. No living mind can process that much quantum energy and remain intact. Jake looked through the grid sensors at the Devourer fleet spreading through the galaxy like a plague. Already several inhabited systems had gone dark as the creatures consumed everything in their path. Billions of lives were being erased from existence with each passing hour. He thought about his crew, about Earth, about all the civilizations that would die if the Devourers were not stopped. Then he thought about the Zephyrians who had placed their faith in a human stranger because ancient prophecies told them he was their salvation. Teach me how to activate the final mode, Jake said quietly. The knowledge flowed into his mind like fire, and Jake Harrison prepared to become the galaxy's final hope against the darkness between the stars. Jake felt the final activation sequence burning into his mind like liquid fire. The knowledge came with memories of the Firstborn hero who had used this weapon 50 million years ago, sacrificing everything to save the galaxy from the first Devourer invasion. The ancient warrior's name had been lost to time, but Jake could feel the echo of their courage and determination flowing through the neural link. There might be another way, Elena said desperately, monitoring the energy readings from the grid network. If we modify the quantum resonance patterns, maybe we can reduce the neural load enough for you to survive. But Jake could see through the grid sensors that there was no time for experiments. The main Devourer fleet had broken through the outer defense lines and was spreading through inhabited systems like a virus. Each creature that reached a populated world consumed billions of lives in minutes, growing larger and more powerful with every planet they devoured. Elena, I need you to promise me something, Jake said, his voice strained from the incredible mental pressure of maintaining the grid connection. When you get back to Earth, tell them what happened here. Make sure they understand that humanity has a responsibility to help protect other civilizations. Elena knelt beside the crystal throne with tears in her eyes. Jake, there has to be another way. The grid network requires a specific neural pattern to activate the final mode, Valdris explained gently. Only Jake carries the complete firstborn genetic sequence needed to channel that much quantum energy. We cannot change the fundamental requirements of the technology. Tony Brooks had been studying the grid systems with the fascination of a born engineer. Captain, what if we could distribute the neural load across multiple people? If we link more minds to the network, maybe we can share the burden enough to keep you alive. Queen Zeraleth rose from her kneeling position and addressed her people throughout the palace ship. Her words were translated for the humans, but Jake could understand. Her meaning directly through the